en Chicago, sin estar organizados, demandan justicia y gloria, despertando sus memorias, aquellos pasados días, que el boricua no sabía, y sus derechos eran negados, y por eso se rebelaron contra de la policía. Todo parecía en silencio, aquel domingo callado, cuando un error policíaco a todo esto dio comienzo, y sin pérdida de tiempo, la colonia comprendía que allí justicia no había, y que fueron maltratados, y por eso se rebelaron contra de la policía, allá en la calle División, contra de la policía. Explicación no ha tenido la policía del distrito cuando aquel pobre niñito por el perro fue mordido, y el público enfurecido se colmó de rebeldía. La justicia no debía tan brutal haber actuado, y por eso se rebelaron contra de la policía, allá en el Humboldt Park, contra de la policía. La ley siguió el incidente, disparando más balazos y dándole macanazos a culpable e inocente. La muchedumbre presente de cólera enfurecida, y el incidente que día con fuerza de los soldados, y por eso se rebelaron contra de la policía, allí los boricuas contra de la policía. Se siguió la confusión, ya todo estaba alterado, peleaban de los soldados cual una revolución. Sin llegar a conclusión, el pleito duró 2 días. La colonia comprendía que los habían maltratado, y por eso sí se rebelaron contra de la policía. Escucha boricua, contra de la policía.
So what I thought I'd do today is that I wanted to give you a little bit of introduction to this topic, to this moment in history, as normally told in the narratives. And what we have today is a series of people who will give you their perspective, their bird's eye view of what happened on that day in 1966. So by way of introduction, I want to talk about how the very first wave of Puerto Ricans began to arrive in the city of Chicago in the 1940s, primarily as contract laborers in industry and agriculture. The Department of Labor Migration Division, as the principal government agency responsible for managing Puerto Rican labor migration throughout the Midwest, tried to encourage migrants to live among whites in order to integrate them into American society, and many Puerto Ricans attempted to do so. At first, Puerto Ricans did in fact live throughout several neighborhoods, including the Loop, back of the Yards, and Chicago's Black Belt. By the 1960s, however, long-held racial fears by the city's white populations had siphoned Puerto Ricans in concentrated numbers into Lincoln Park, West Town, and Humboldt Park, where they faced economic and political marginalization, police abuse, housing discrimination, and abuse by landlords and neighbors. In Lincoln Park, Puerto Ricans established a small enclave along Armitage Avenue that included small businesses, religious, social, and cultural networks. But by the 1960s, Puerto Rican and other low-income residents of Lincoln Park, including Mexicans, Polish, and African Americans, faced displacement from urban renewal. Progressively, Puerto Ricans relocated to West Town and Humboldt Park, where they created the Puerto Rican barrio along La Division. I wanted to, as I read the next few points, I wanted to play a video that was recently put together by Carlos Flores. How many of you know Carlos Flores? Many of you do. A real gem, you know, by all accounts, the unofficial visual historian of Humboldt Park and La Division and Puerto Rican Chicago. And he wanted to be here with us today, but for health reasons, he could not be here. But I promised that I would share this, and I'm not sure that we'll be able to play it in its entirety, but he does have it available on his Facebook page, so you could friend him on Facebook and check out his work. Really important reflections because of his passion for documentation from the very beginning. So I just want to share this as I continue, if it works here. So churches, especially the Chicago Roman Catholic Archdiocese and the parish councils, played an important initial role in creating the social spaces for new migrants to form communities. This included Los Caballeros de San Juan, the Knights of St. John, organized in 1954 by Puerto Rican lay people and Father Leo Mahone in the Woodlawn community that eventually became citywide. By the 1960s, Los Caballeros and the Women's Auxiliary, Las Damas de Santa Maria, held some of the city's largest Puerto Rican religious and social events throughout the city. Now, among these events that Los Caballeros organized was the celebration of El Día de San Juan Bautista. In 1966, hoping to broaden the event, they joined with other groups to organize the first Puerto Rican Parade and Festival Committee, to create the massive downtown parade followed by the festival in Humboldt Park that we've got to know. The first one was held Sunday, June 12, 1966. Immediately following the celebration, a white police officer named Thomas Munyon shot and wounded Aracelis, or Celín, I heard it was, as he was known, Cruz, a 20-year-old Puerto Rican man about a mile east of Humboldt Park in Wicker Park, near the corner of Division and Damon, after chasing him and a friend through an alley. When Munyon's backup squad arrived on the scene, they beat the crowd with their nightsticks and used attack dogs to control the crowd. News of the shooting spread quickly. Rumors swirled that the young victim had been unarmed and had already died, although he would later recover from his injuries. The attack by the police ignited the already mounted tension in El Barrio in response to intolerable housing conditions and the brutal treatment of Puerto Rican youth by the infamously racist Chicago Police Department. The song that I was playing at the beginning is a song known as called Los Motines de Chicago, the Chicago Uprisings, by Simón Gómez Gomez. It's a song in the Jíbaro style about the uprising that was evidently quite popular. It was banned from being aired and sold in Chicago. The FBI eventually removed it from record stores and threatened radio stations that were thinking of playing it. What's especially important about that song is that Gomez was actually living in Puerto Rico at the time, showing how far beyond Humboldt Park and Westtown the effect was felt. The uprising yielded a radical shift in the history of Puerto Ricans in Chicago. It impelled the creation of many community-based projects to address the problems that were facing the community and that we'll hear about today. It also helped politicize some of Chicago's street gangs that has played, including, for example, the Young Lords, that has played such a significant role in the political consciousness of now several generations of young activists. To reflect on the memories about the Division Street Uprising of 1966, we have a panel of speakers here today that are really going to help to facilitate a community conversation about how we remember and narrate this history to today's youth, especially to today's youth especially was what I was trying to say, and to other communities in Chicago and beyond. We want to think about what happened, but also what the community has gained from that confrontation and what lessons we can recover and project into the present and future of the Chicago Boricua community. In the interest of time, I'm going to follow a pretty strict format. I'm charged with timekeeping, so I'm going to ask that comments and questions stay within a certain amount of time today. The panelists are going to introduce themselves. There's a longer introduction and bio in your programs if you have one. Please take a look at those so you can see the depth and wealth of contributions that these three panelists have made in their community. The panelists are going to introduce themselves, like I said, give a brief summary of their points of view. Then I'd like to open it up to you, the community, so that you may build on the conversation with any of your own memories, questions, or comments to the panelists. I also ask that you respectfully limit your reflections to 3 minutes or so, that we can reach as many perspectives as possible. So without further delay, we want to begin with Carlos, and then Omar, and then Delia, and they're going to introduce themselves. And thank you so much for your attention today. You can sit. You sure? Okay.
My name is Carlos Castro, and I think I've been in this community too long. I came here when I was a year old, and I think that I could speak not from hearsay, but from being there. And too many times our story gets told from hearsay. Too many times our story gets told because you were across the street and you saw what happened. But what happened on that hot day of 1966, it was the frustration of police abuse. It was the frustration of discrimination, lack of jobs for young people. And on that particular day when Celine got shot, dogs were brought to the corner of Crystal and Damon, not Division and Damon. That kicked off when I was at the house, and about 75 people came screaming, "Carlos, Carlos," they're throwing the dogs at us. I came down, and the dogs were there. But you know, the interesting thing that when the dogs, before it was brought up to our community, it was happening in the Afro-American community. And when it was happening to them, it was funny. Mira como los pejos lo muerden. Mira como lo arrastran. But when it happened to us, we screamed out, "We're not animals." But when it's happening across the street to the Afro-American community, it was a joke. It was fun because it wasn't us. But when it happened to us, we took it very serious and it blew up. It wasn't not only the dogs, but 13th District Police Station was one of the most dangerous districts that you wanted to be picked up, because most of the Gaylords, the Sino, the Playboy, and every other group that was not dark Their parents were police officers. And when we got picked up, we got turned loose in their neighborhood. And they blew the horn, letting them know that they had one of us in the area. Urquhart Park was a battleground behind there. When the story gets told, a lot of things get left out because people were not there, people hearsay, or they were just passing through. It is true that the struggle of 1966 and the changes came from the bottom up. Los títeres, the guy in the street, the so-called game banger. But let me educate you. There was no gang involved in the negotiating group. Not in those years. They might have been around in the neighborhood, but they were not part of the body that put demand on Richard Daley to change some course of us being involved in the system. Because we thought by that, police brutality would change. Well, it only got worse when some of our own people became police officers. We got our tails whipped quicker, and they looked the other way. They were not witnesses to anything that happened. We didn't have an elected official. Everybody wanted a job. When we met with Mayor Daley that day and put some demand, some of our so-called quote-unquote leadership didn't want us to meet and put demand. No, just put suggestions. We said, hell no. These are demand. Meet them or else. Daley said these words. I was there in the committee. If you don't stop, I'm going to call the National Guard. I don't know how many of you remember. The National Guard was on Jackson, across the street from us. They were already there on the west side. We were riding over here. They, here in return, said, okay, what are the courses? Let me say real quickly some of the changes that the street, the títere, the hoodlum, the so-called quote-unquote gangs took place. Some of the demands were lower the height on the police officers. We were too short. At that time, the height was too high. Today, you have white women who took advantage of those demands. Today, you have white, black, and some in Spanish. They're midgets. There's nice stickers bigger than they are, but they're police officers today. Okay, those demands came from those groups. They were not quote unquote educated. They were from the grassroots. They came the same way, the same demand on police brutality that is going on today. The same way, young people creating changes. If you think those changes in the police department is coming because elected official, you're fooling yourself. No, those demands are being made by you, by young people, by voters. That is very important to know. Young people created a lot of changes in the city, especially in the Puerto Rican community. We had to coalesce, and we were going to meetings in the Afro-American community. We would get stopped on the corner of Augusta near the expressway going down, and we would be turned back because we were going to be educated by those niggas at Operation Push at that time. And will we get turned back? So it is very important. Yes, there was a disturbance on Division and Damon, on Division and Crystal. Yes, it was there, but it wasn't eluded in the sense that white people were being dragged out. A lot of people got caught up in the midst of that motín, but they weren't dragged out of the car. They were escorted out of the neighborhood. So it is very important for us to focus on the changes and why did it happen. No, nothing had come from the top down. Some people dare to say today that Daley did us a favor. He was forced. He was embarrassed. The Afro-American community was exploding in one end. Now you got the Puerto Rican exploding at the other. What the hell is going on? The same oppression, police brutality, lack of services. When we rioted overnight, our department, which was called Department of Human Services, was put on Division and Damon overnight. He said, Carlos, I cannot. It was a committee, but not one professional, not one minister was in that committee. Not one. It was all grassroots. He said, I cannot lower the height just for Puerto Rican, but I lowered it across the board. That was good. That's all we wanted, because we figured we won't get whipped as quick. Well, it didn't change. We still got whipped because they looked the other way. So it is important for us to know how we are here today and what are the changes. Not, it's important to know that we're here, but where are we going to go from here? The city is exploding in the same direction, same abuses. You know how many lives were destroyed by the police department for writing phony reports? You know how many lives went to prison on phony reports, false writing police report, went to 13th district, and we kept saying it's a frame-up? It's a frame-up, and they said, no, they're a bunch of hoodlums. And a whole lot of young people, adults today, that might be sitting here, went to jail, went to prison. I ran every reform school you got in the city because of frame-up. If we were too active, they want to get us off the street. When we screened for Burt and the brutality that was going on in 11th State, a lot of people didn't believe it. But when he got indicted, and I was part of that committee that got him indicted, then people said, oh my God. And that was going on, that torture was going on in 11th State. The guy put in battery wires on your teeth and other parts of your body and then turn it on so you could confess and submit. When we said it, nobody listened. But it exploded. He went to jail. He didn't lose his pension. Any other city employee would have. But what I'm saying to that is that changes don't come from the top. Changes come because of you getting involved, you voting. If abuse and oppression comes, it's because you allow it. Don't be part of it, but at least listen to what's going on. Because when they get through with me, they're going to come for you. And that's the facts. And I think that when we sometimes try to belittle the movement of that time, it was by saying, oh, there were gangs and gangs were involved. Ma'am, sir, no. I was negotiating until 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, setting up agenda to meet with Richard Daley to present him with those demands. If you want to talk about gangs, talk about the hamburgers. I don't know how many of you know about the hamburgers. Mayor Daley was the leader of it. And it was set up specifically to keep Puerto Ricans and niggas out of Richport. It was nothing else. Now, that was what they call it, a youth group. And it was called the Hamburgers. And they wore black leather jacket with a hamburger in the back, and Daley was the leader. King was involved. Eddie Netzer was involved. The city of Chicago has been corrupt from the beginning of time. Am I asking you to register and I'm asking you to vote? Yes. The only way to clean it up, can we clean it up? It's going to be hard because the people we get elected become more corrupt than the ones inside. And that's the facts. We cannot vote for an Hispanic, a Puerto Rican, a black, just because of the color. What are you doing? What's your agenda? And his agenda is one that we must give him. Look at our neighborhood. And some of them, they came in representing us, are super rich. Some of them attempted to represent a different agenda, and today they're rich. And they came in talking about tumbar pescuezo de gallina and doing this and doing that. And all they have become is property pimps. That's all they have become. We need to stay on top. If you don't vote, you have no power. If you don't get involved, you don't have no power. And it'll continue and continue repeating itself into the shooting of young people. Today is a frustration of the same police brutality that we were going through. Nothing has changed. The frame up from police. The only thing that has changed is because young adults, young people are forcing the police department to do some changes in the way they, but the blue silence exists. It exists. Manny and Olson. were just indicted a couple of months ago, a year ago, for being together with the mob. They came out of the 13th district. A young man gets hung in the 14th district for a violation of a ticket. When we went in front of judges, they knew what was going on. Some judges are today saying, throw that case out of court as a frame-up. We need to be involved in whatever happens in our community because we are the community. And we get in new people here. We got an individual that dared to say, I'll be so glad when my ward changes white so I won't deal with my own. We need to target people like that politically. And we need to find out who they are. We need to expose them. Because if you know about it and you know it's a crooked cop and you don't, you will be next. And all I'm saying to you that the changes that are come into the city, and it's going to get worse before it gets better, is simple because you allow it. Not a politician, not nobody else, because if we could vote them in, we could vote them out. But we have to stay involved. We have to. The only power we got is the vote. The vote. And with this, I state that it is important for us to coalesce with different groups across the city because they're pushing us out of this community. And we're moving in two different areas. We're going to wind up being neighbors regardless you like it or not. It's just a matter of us respecting each other and pulling together. We could disagree to be disagreeable and still respect each other. So it is important that you look at yourself on election day. Don't be too lazy to vote. Don't vote for a guy just because he's Hispanic, white, or black. Look at his report card. What issue has he stand on? And on those issues, you put your life and your grandchildren and everybody else involved.
Buenas tardes. I want to ask, before I give you my presentation, a question. How many of you, just raise your hands, were around during the riots? Great. Beautiful. Beautiful. And I'm also very happy to see a lot of youth here because, in my opinion, the story of the riots is really a story of the youth. I think that we will come to the conclusion that who really initiated that confrontation, the riots, and who kept it going for 3 days and 3 nights was the youth. They were the ones that confronted the system. Those were the ones that brought about change. So I'm glad to see a lot of youth also over here so that we can share our experiences with you. So before I go on, I want to mention some disclaimers. I'm not Puerto Rican, I'm Mexican. But I feel very fortunate that when my family came to Chicago from Mexico, we landed in Humboldt Park back in 1957, so that all of my life really has been in the Puerto Rican community. All of my activism has been with Puerto Rican groups. So that there's an anecdote. I have my daughter who's here was telling me that she was talking to some friends that knew me from when I was young, and they found out in conversation that I was not Puerto Rican, that I was Mexican. And they said to my daughter, they said, well, you know what, I can't believe that Omar is not Puerto Rican. And she said, I know, he doesn't believe it either. So I lived through the days of the riot. I was a young man at the time. Again, because we were living in this community, I graduated from Yates Elementary School, not too far from here. Yeah. I went to Tully High School. I graduated from Tully High School. And from 1961 to 1964, I was an employee of the hot dog stand on Division in Maplewood. So I was right in the thick of things, during those years. So what I'm going to share with you is my personal perception of the 3 days of the riot. And one of the things that Carlos and I have been talking about is that we need to document the stories. That's why I ask you how many were in the riots, because we need to document those stories so that we can pass them on to the youth so they understand what happened. And instead of just reading books that somebody wrote because they read something in the newspaper or they did some research, rather than to do that, I think that we need the primary sources to give us that. And Carlos and I began a little group that is called Chicago Latino Coalition 2020, and we wanted to document that. That was back in 2011. And I'm going to, part of my presentation, I'm going to read from a little pamphlet that we put together that has some of that. It has a part of an interview with Carlos and some of what I've experienced. So back to the riots. I think that it's very fortunate for people like Carlos and I who are old. Excuse you? We are old. That we have the opportunity to look back and then analyze what happened then and come to conclusions. When we were living that, we were unable to do it because we were active in it. But I think today we can say two things. Again, we mentioned the youth is the one that really generated, all of their activity. But at the same time, and I think we have to recognize that there was a whole group of adult leadership in the Puerto Rican community that were also had good intentions of establishing a respectable community, and they were doing their share. So there were two parallel groups, the youth that were being harassed, that were being put into paddy wagons and then dropped in enemy territory. And then you had the adult leadership that wanted to establish itself and get respect from the city. I think on June 12th of 1966, that leadership felt that they had made it, that the city structures were recognizing all the work that they had done by having them do the parade downtown and then 3 days of festivities in Humboldt Park. So, they felt that they had made it. But at the same time, on Damon and Crystal, we have the beginning of the riots. So there was, there were two extremes going on at the same time. And the youth, in essence, were saying, enough. We had gone through a lot of experiences with the police, especially the police, being harassed. I know that in Division in Maplewood, we were constantly getting visits from the police all the time. And we not only had to fight the police, but we had to fight a lot of the gangs that were in the area. And we were just talking a little while ago with Georgie, who was over here, that one of the big groups that we really had to fight against was Chi West. Now, I don't know how many of you have heard of the name, but Chi West was a strong group. Carlos mentioned a lot of them, their relatives were policemen. So, they felt strong. But that kind of harassment, that kind of police brutality really was brewing all of this time, and it blew up on June 12th of 1966. Now, that was the beginning. I think there were other elements. How come, if it was only on Damon and Crystal, how come the riots just in one night went from Damon and Division all the way to California and Division? I mean, how do you explain something like that? I think one of the pieces of information that we, seldom get is that their radio was very popular at the time. And the Puerto Rican community always tuned in to certain programs. There was a program on Sunday afternoons by a very popular disc jockey, and his name was Carlitos Agreló. Carlitos Agreló, they used to call him El Boricua Argentino. I don't know how many of you remember El Teatro San Juan by Hoyne and Division. All right. Well, on the second floor, there was a whole series of offices. There was a radio station where Carlitos Agreló used to broadcast his Sunday afternoon programs. So when the riots began, all he did was look out the window, and he had a view of everything that was going on and how the police was treating the youth and anyone that was going by. And he began to talk about it on the air. So then he had a big audience, so they all heard, it was actually a live broadcast of the riots. And I think that explains why so many people came out to protest, the police brutality on that Sunday afternoon. And that's how, I think that's the only thing that we can explain why it spread from Damon all the way to California so fast in one night. So again, it was the youth that was driving this confrontation. And I think that, again, I have to, my hats off to Carlos, because Carlos was right in the thick of things. And I think if you look at pictures today of those 3 days, the one face that you can recognize in those pictures is Carlos. From the time that he was confronting the police and the dogs, there's a picture of that, to when he was carrying someone who was, injured. I guess he was, were you carrying to the paddy wagon or to the ambulance? Ambulance? To the ambulance, okay. To when he got hit on the head also with a brick. So he was right in the thick of things. I think Carlos represented the youth right at that moment. And I think it's also very symbolic that all the demands that were generated, demands that were taken to City Hall, came out from the group that Carlos was active with. This thing about the height of the police came from him. It wasn't anybody else that was thinking deeply. It was Carlos who was experiencing certain things and came out with that. And all the other demands for city services also came out of that. So I think that, again, this is a good example of youth being capable of generating a series of demands to confront the system. Now, I have a lot of friends that are Mexican, and when we talk, it says, how come Puerto Ricans have judges, they have congressmen, they have state representatives, they have all kinds of representation in the political systems, and Mexicans, they're pretty far behind. And my answer to that is because the Puerto Rican community confronted the system openly, whereas the Mexican community hasn't yet confronted the system that way. I mean, we always had what do they call them? The middlemen. We've always had middlemen for the Mexican community who, takes care of whoever has some needs. But in the case of the Puerto Rican community, it was the youth, it was the community that confronted the system. So the system did respond. From those negotiations, it responded. Not only did the system respond and brought social services to the community, but the riots itself generated, again, the need to organize. And I think one of the organizations that came out of the riots, well, there were a couple. The Hispanic Action Committee was one of them. The other one was the Latin American Defense Organization. And Omar Lopez is here. He's the one that organized it. And that was in response to the needs that families had. Not only did the Latin American Defense Organization worked at getting all of the young people that were in jail out of jail, but it also began to respond to the needs that their families had. Once they started getting them out of jail, they began to find out that the family were having problems. So that was how Lado also began to grow and and organize the welfare union. So it was the young mothers that formed the Lado Welfare Union, and they became a power in the community. So that was one of the results. I think ABC was another, Allies for a Better Community, that also came out of the riots. So we see that out of the riots, there were some very positive things. There were a lot of negative things, but a lot of the young people got put in jail. But there were a lot of positive things that came out of it. One is the recognition from the city that they needed to bring the resources and the social services into the community. And the organizations that began to put the community together. You know, in addition to the established leadership, which was like Caballeros de San Juan, Las Damas de María, there was a whole host of Los Hijos de Sidra, Hijos de Macao. You know, that was the structure in the Puerto Rican community. In addition to that, then come all the organizations that decided, you know, to be direct action organizations that were the ones that began to build the base for then candidates to begin to be elected into office. So what we see today, what all the elected officials that we have and whatever else we have today in our community is really the result of the actions that the youth took back in 1966. And I think that we need to document that history. We need to share that history with the youth so that they understand that there is a deep history. You know, things didn't happen overnight. Even though a lot of politicians may like to say that it was because they are the ones that organized and that's why they're elected, it wasn't that way. It was the organization of the community that really made first the conditions, created the conditions, and made it possible for them to be elected, and that's where we are today. So I think that my time is over. Okay, gigs will be. This is available to you for a small donation in the back. So when you walk out, I think it's an incomplete work because it's a work in progress, but it has a lot of good information for you. Okay, thank you.
So good evening. Buenas noches. So guess what? I have two disclaimers. The first one, believe it or not, I was not born in the 60s. Although sometimes my gray hairs are beginning to show up, say otherwise. The second one is that I'm not Puerto Rican. I'm not Mexican. I'm Guatemalan. So I am born and raised in Humboldt Park, and my entire life I have lived within a mile radius of this church, which is only about 21 years, but whatever. I want to talk to you a little bit about, for me in this last part, what the movement of the 60s and what the shakers and movers who have been here, who raised their hand, people like Carlos, people like Omar, have done for all of us. Not just Puerto Ricans, not just Latinos, but for our city. You see, my mother and my father migrated from Guatemala in the late 70s, early 80s, and we moved into Humboldt Park when I was just 3 months old. My mother, I am my mother's daughter, a woman committed to social justice even if she doesn't know what the actual terms of a title mean, was someone that wanted to do something in her community. My father the same. And so while my father worked overnight in a factory, my mother worked 2-3 other jobs, they both started working at an organization by the name of HIMRI. Does anyone here has heard of HIMRI? The Humboldt Park Infant Mortality Reduction Initiative. Offices on North and Rockwell in the Bickerdike building. I have a good memory to be this young, huh? So I share this story to you because for me, as I think about my own journey and as a Latina committed to my community, this community, as someone that sees the Puerto Rican struggle and the Puerto Rican empowerment a direct reflection of how I can move and how my community can be empowered, I realized that it was having my migrant parents working as caseworkers at HIMRI, having the opportunity when mom didn't have a babysitter to go with her to do the visits with other women and their children, that was really the transformative impact in my life that led me to today. I remember my mom telling me when I was about 5 or 6 that we would go to Springfield for HIMRI because we too had budget cuts in the 80s. nothing like what we have now, but certainly budget cuts. And she said that there I would be with her and all the mothers from Himry and all the leaders from Humboldt Park, and somehow this 3-year-old little girl would find a way to the center of where the Lincoln Monument was at, and I was fighting and I was screaming, no more cuts, in Spanish and whatever broken English I had. Now, I had no idea what that meant, but it was that blood from Humboldt Park. As I think about what happened in Springfield and the opportunity that I've had as a result of the fight, the constant fight, I'm reminded that our young people, the same way in the 60s, today are not the future of this city. Quite the opposite, you are the present. We can't wait for you to be 35, 45, 55 to get this work done. You're doing it right now. So at the age of 21, the church that I go to, Humboldt Park United Methodist Church, made me their executive director for their shelter and homeless program. I celebrate that, but more than anything, I celebrate all of the people that made that shelter, that soup kitchen, possible. You see, it was people like Raymond Figueroa, Aracelis Figueroa, Francisco Arroyo, and all of the people from Department of Human Service, the Puerto Ricans that were commissioners in those years that made it possible, as we had gentrification, to open the first shelter in the 1980s in Humboldt Park in Logan Square. As I think back about my own life, my struggle, my family struggle, my mother's struggle to migrate through the Rio Grande so that I could be born in the United States, I have to put my hat down to people like Carlos, like Omar, like Hilda, and all of you here that have fought hard and sacrificed everything so that we could be here today. So I want to really thank you for that. And I want to tell you that as I look back and I hear the history, I'm reminded that it is 50 years since those riots. It's 50 years since those riots. This year, we're also celebrating 50 years since Dr. King came to Chicago, moved here for the fight for affordable housing. We are still fighting right now. We are fighting for our housing. We are fighting for our jobs. We are fighting to keep the organizations that in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, and 90s were started just so that they can still open its doors. We are still fighting today. And so if ever before, we must recognize the history of 50 years ago is today. If ever before we have to say enough with the division is today. Black and brown communities must come together. We are one. And so as I think about the richness of Humboldt Park, of Division Street, of North Avenue, of Armitage, I know that it is not a neighborhood just for one group, but it is a neighborhood that when we all move up together. And today, as I think about the challenges that we have, particularly around gentrification, particularly around police brutality, we need to do something together. We must look back at what happened. We must look at the sacrifices that the people that came before us have made, and we must say enough is enough. We must say that we fight this together so that we no longer are celebrating first and only. That's my dream. I dream that I no longer have to celebrate the first senator, the first state representative, the first mayor, the first leader, the first female in a church, that we no longer have to celebrate first and certainly no longer have to celebrate only. It is only when we are together that we're able to do this fight. So as I think about Himry, as I think about our community, as I think about all the challenges that we have, the churches have been movers and shakers. The people in this room have been movers and shakers. And I challenge you to think about, where are we today? Are we in a better place than we were 50 years ago? And if we are not in a much better place than we were 50 years ago, what is your job what is my job and what is our joint job to be where we must be when we no longer celebrate first, we no longer celebrate only, we celebrate equity.
Thank you so much. That was rich. That was rich. What an amazing pleasure. Thank you all so much. I want to now open up the conversation to you all. Questions, comments, reflections. Again, in the interest of time, I see the clock moving way faster than I am in my head right now. So let's try to minimize our questions and condense them as much as possible to a few minutes. But I already see a hand up, so let's just get right back to it. As a matter of fact, if it's possible, if you are able to come up to the mic so that we can get accurate recordings of this as well. If you're not able to, then just make sure you speak up really loudly, okay? And I'll try my best to cover as many people as possible. So, yes, I'll bring it right here.
Yes, Carlos and Omar, thank you. I was, when you said how many of you were around for the riots, I raised my hand, right? Because I thought you were referring to I wasn't sure, but I thought maybe you were going to touch up on the riot in 1974. What was it? All right, 77. And I just wanted to bring that up because 10 years later, there's another explosion in Humboldt Park, and that one went on for 3 days. And I just wanted to just bring that into light that 10-year span, that decade, nothing really changed. Or it just exploded. I just wanted to see if there was some correlation, or obviously there is, and I just wanted to bring that up. I remember I was a student at Yates, and Monday, 2 of my friends came to school with big bandages. Their heads were bandaged up. They looked like pumpkins. And one of them was from Puerto Rico. And I said, Luis, ¿qué te pasó? Y dice, brother, me cogieron los policías en caballo y me chocaron con la caneca. I said, ¿tú estabas allá? He goes, yeah. He said, so anyways, I just wanted to bring that into light, that the people that 10 years later, it happened again.
Unfortunately, we only have one mic, so we'll just pass it around. Did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, just briefly, I think that, those riots 10 years after the 66, I think, that was something that showed that not enough things were happening, in those 10 years. And I think mostly with the youth. I think that the police harassment continued, for years after that. And again, I think that that's what triggered the riots 10 years after. And I'm glad to see here we're alumni of Yates Elementary School. Yeah, that's nice.
I just want to remind you of people who were at the time Puerto Rico Beauty Castle. Anybody remember about the Puerto Rico Beauty Castle? No. Did anybody remember Dr. Anthony Silveri? No? You are too young. But the Puerto Rico Beauty Castle was a very important place because that's where I found out of the police brutality. They came, the police, and they said, you have to contribute to the police thing. And if she didn't, they came and break their windows, and then she have to pay to repair, and then they come back again. As far as the food pantry, I ran the food pantry at 2358 North Clybourne, all on my own, with my own money and my own time. And that was the most happiest times of my life. Also, the little brothers of the You remember the Little Brothers of the Poor? Anybody? I was a very active member of the Little Brothers of the Poor, and I went into the Cabrini Green, and I went every place where I saw the brutality of the system, how people were treated, and we did what we could to change that.
Hi, good evening. Muy buenas tardes a todos. Couldn't we have had a better panel today? The richness in history and the richness in their experiences way beyond our wildest dreams. But in this room, there are plenty more. So I would implore the church to do this and do this with many more people's experiences. It would be a blessing. You touched on police brutality, gentlemen, and yes, there were police brutality. I was born in '67. However, in the '80s, you mentioned, Carlos, Latino policemen turning their face. But in the '80s, I lost a lot of friends due to frame-ups by a Puerto Rican policeman named Ray Guevara. And this church here led in the freedom of many people that were framed by Ray Guevara. My brother is one of them. There is more to come shortly, so church, please stay involved. Omar, you mentioned Lado. Delia was a 3-year-old in Springfield. I was a 3-year-old on the scaffold of the Lado building when we lived at 1458 North Rockwell. Yes, that was huge. That was huge in my experience to want to be involved. And it's because of your leadership, Obed's, my grandma's, and other members that, of that organization that I am forever indebted to. In the 80s, we also fought the Chi West and the Gaylords, and that 14th district was horrible. I talked a lot about sacrifices that were made by members of the community, like your mom, Delia. Yes, they did make those sacrifices, and those sacrifices have not gone in vain, as you could see here. So thank you all for your fight. Thank you for blazing the path, and I just wanted to share a little bit on how you impacted my life. Thank you.
We'll take a question over here, and then I don't want to neglect anybody who's not able to stand and has a question. Just raise your hand really high, and we'll try to get to you.
Oh, hi. This is Fredo Aviles. I've lived here for over 50 years. And I have seen many changes in our community thanks to people like Lado, Spanish Action Committee, and I'd like to mention also the Catholic Church, because the Catholic Church played an important role in this community to their Caballero de San Juan. However, the Catholic Church was betrayed by Cardinal Cody, who was a close friend of Mayor Daley. And when he saw that people in those churches were becoming more active, he decided to move all the priests and nuns who were working with the Puerto Rican community down to Panama. And that killed really the movement of the Catholic Church members being involved in community action and activity. So I just wanted to mention that because I think it's an important thing to remember that there were some members in the Catholic Church, John Donahue. I mean, he was a member, a priest at that moment who was moved to Panama because he was very active. And I don't remember her name, but it was also a sister, a nun who was very active, and they were just backed out one day and said, "You're going to serve the Catholic members who live in Panama." So they all moved to Panama. And that was the end of the Catholic movement in Chicago in terms of just social justice. So thank you very much, Omar.
In the 1960s, Fred Aviles was the first Puerto Rican, first Latino draft objector in the city of Chicago. He was against the war in Vietnam. and he served time because of that. And he came back to be active in our community. So, Fred, we need to understand that. So the young people here need to understand that too.
Does anybody want to ask a question? Is not able to stand right now? If not, we'll go over here. Okay. Did you want to respond to?
Let me say that young people, as well as adults, we have to be very cautious. There was an agency in our community working with our young people. Every single youth worker in that agency became a police officer, betrayed the movement, betrayed the young people. Every single youth worker in that program coming from the YMCA became an informer, became a police officer. I took the test, didn't even pick up the pencil, and I passed it with a 98 score. Didn't even pick up the pencil. Didn't even pick up the pencil. I'm just saying to say that anytime there is a positive move with young people, many of us at that time went frame up to jail. Youth workers gave up the files and names and addresses of young people, and they became police officers today. What I am saying is that when the police department announced jobs, gang leaders come to a meeting, you're being set up. You're being tagged. It happened in the South Side. It happened on Woodland. There was a meeting for jobs. All gang leaders come, you'll get a job. 30 days later, every single one of them that went there. You're not a leader, you're a youth, a young adult. When you represent yourself as such, you're putting yourself up for a target. Do not attend those meetings. Whatever you do, meetings for young people to get jobs, yes. Gang leaders, give me a break.
Thank you. Thank you so much. You guys have been so great and inspirational. But as you guys are talking, I keep thinking that, can you guys hear me out there? Sorry. Okay. Can you hear me now? Okay. Thank you. So one thing that I keep thinking in my head, like as you guys are talking, is the effects that this institutional oppression, the effect that it had for us. Like, I'm a descendant of someone that was part of that riot that day, and it affected him mentally really bad. It was very detrimental. And one of the things that I can't get out of my mind is that as Boricuas, as Puerto Ricans, mental illness is our #1 health crisis. It is a health crisis that has been forced on us because of government testing happening on the island, right? And also, it hits me hard that you've lived, who's the person that just came up here and said he's been here 50 years, you know? You are a survivor, thank you for saying your story, right? So how do we organize around that? Because our mental health, we all know 6 were closed, right, in 2012. What did that do to this community? What did it do to all these communities that rely on those public services, you know? And so you're saying that, yes, it's this thing of police brutality, and it's so systemic, it's in everything, it's in school, it's everywhere. And I just wanted to mention that because it is also, yeah, it's police brutality. It is women's reproductive rights issues as well within this community, all over the city. So I did want to say that just to sort of link all these things because they're all together. And thank you very much. And I see so many like seniors here. You guys are beautiful, and thank you so much. Thank you.
I think that the value of this kind of a meeting is just exactly that. I think that, yeah, we can talk about 50 years ago, but, and I also emphasize the presence of the youth here this evening, because I think that we are entering a new cycle in the history of our community. And I think that now we have to rely on the youth of today to really begin to formulate a new program for our community. I think that it's your world. I mean, it's ours, but in the final, this is your world today. And I think that we can, as senior citizens, we can contribute our experience, but I think it's your view of the world today that has to be done. I think that urban renewal used to be urban renewal then, now it's gentrification, mental health. The health system is really not responding to our community. There's no jobs. It's nice that we concentrate on raising money for scholarships for our youth to go to college, but we forget all of those that can't make it to college. So we also need to take care of people like that and make it part of a program now for vocational education. But I think right now is the youth now that has the opportunity, to develop a new approach and start a new movement, and we're ready to support.
As we think about the conversations that we're having right now about police accountability, we all know, and most of us have seen the video of Laquan McDonald in November. We saw how our young people got to the streets, and it didn't matter. It was December 23rd on Washington, New York State. People were out there. Didn't matter if they were going to get arrested. And it was young people who said, the status quo no more works. They were out there constantly, interrupted usual business, and then got rid of their state's attorney. I'm not going to be political, but amen. Particularly around police accountability. Later this month, our mayor is going to be talking about his police reforms. And I just want to really, really challenge us to what Carlos said. The movement does not start here, it starts here. And we have to hold our elected officials accountable. Whatever these reforms are, we have to make sure they're not something under a rug to keep us shut. And we have to remember that our young people should not just be in the movement, they should be leading the movement, and we have to sometimes just step back and shut up and let them lead. So today, I really challenge us to think about where we're at. Think about the importance of our young people who are not conditioned the way we are in our structures, in our processes, in our systems, in our bureaucracy, who have a globalized view, who have access to social media. Let them lead. And let's not be threatened by that, but let us be the allies to them to do that. If this city is going to change, it certainly needs new blood. But then the new blood needs a space to be able to do that. And sometimes that means that the mic no longer has to be on us, and that includes me. So I really want to challenge us as we talk about mental health, as we talk about police accountability, as we talk about gentrification. I live 2 blocks from the new trail. I want to stay here, and we need to stay here. But it's going to require for us to work with groups like the groups that are here, like Grassroots Collaborative, like Community Renewal Society, like Latino Coalition 2020. We have to work together, folks, and we have to go across color lines. So I'm really challenging us today. I really have to tell you that there is an urgency. There is an urgency for us to be bridge builders, to cross intersections and let our young people lead, but also create jobs for them to be able to do that. It's the only way. We won't be here in 50 years talking about a massacre. that we're in loss of so many lives because we did not do this together. Let's not let history continue to repeat. We have to do this together. So if you want information about opportunities around fair cops and reforms, talk to me or Maria there. If you want to talk about how to get involved in the community, there's Ryan and many people here. We're all in it together. And I think you're absolutely right. We have to talk about mental health. We have to talk about housing. And we have to also understand that it is not just me, and it is not just the African American community, the Latino community. It is also our allies. And it is the people that have been here for 50, 60 years. We have to do this together.
Yeah, and I just want to add one more thing. I think that it's very easy for us to say, well, it's the youth now, it's the youth. But there's got to be the vehicles for them to be involved. And I think this is a good opportunity for institutions like San Lucas to, as the Bible says, to go back to its first love, which was to really be an advocate for our community. I think that Community Renewal Society has a very good opportunity now to come back also. Go back to your first love. The Community Renewal Society was present during the riots of 1966. They were active. They were there. So I think this is also a good opportunity, but we need the churches to be the vehicles. We need institutions like that so that the youth can come in, because again, it's very easy to say it's on you, it's your world, it's your reality today, but where are the vehicles? And I think that the church has a very important role, and I think institutions like Community Renewal Society, I think that the housing institutions, as a matter of fact, we have a good friend that had to recently move from Humboldt Park, where he has lived all of his life, all the way to the south side because he couldn't get affordable housing in this area, because when he was a youth, he got in trouble. So now when he fills out an application, that comes out. He's like, maybe in his 60s now, and he committed a crime when he was 14, and he can't get housing because of that. That's not right. So we have to fight things like that so that we don't lose, our members that way.
In the summer of 1966, I was 14 years old, and I was working for the as a volunteer receptionist and office worker for the Coordinating Council of Community Organizations, CCCO, on the south side of Chicago that had organized school boycotts beginning in 1965 and had been the lead organization that invited Dr. King to come to Chicago in 1966. And I just want to let you know how important, I don't call it the riots, I call it the revolution. The revolution in Humboldt Park was to Dr. King. It was an aha moment, because I was serving the coffee, I was taking the phone calls. I knew Jesse Jackson, who was just a graduate student giving out picket signs, literally. I was in on the ground floor. I had no power, but I had big ears, ojos y orejas abiertas a todo eso. And what I heard was, and I heard this from scholars of education that were advising the CCCO, oh my God, we're not keeping any statistics on Hispanics. Or they would come Spanish people at that time. We don't know how many Hispanos there are in the school system, except in New York and Texas and California. Those statistics weren't kept. The Chicago Public Schools would say there were white kids and there were black kids and nobody else. You would never know. And those were moments when the statistics had to change and when the mindset had to change. And for Dr. King, who came from Atlanta, who came from a completely different mindset, his mind was blown just by Chicago and the kind of ghettoization he saw in Chicago that wasn't even present in Atlanta. That there were whole communities of poor people, people of color that weren't African American that he needed to reach out to, and I really think that the seed for the Poor People's Campaign that he was working on at the time of his death began after the revolution on Division Street. And when Dr. King spoke at a large gathering that had been planned for months and months at Soldier Field, they made sure to include a representative representative of the Puerto Rican community, a minister, and I'm sorry, I don't remember his name, but I remember stuffing all those leaflets and distributing all those leaflets. We made sure we had Spanish translations of those leaflets to bring out people to start to build a coalition that still needs to be built and rebuilt. But it was a beginning. And just to quote something from the African American tradition, we ain't where we want to be, we ain't where we're going to be, but thank God we ain't where we was. And 1966 was the beginning of that. Muchas gracias a todos.
Okay, we are, oh, do you want to respond to that? We are running out of time, and I definitely want to get to the last two people standing. Carlos is, and want to be able to kind of summarize with the panelists themselves. So we'll take the last two questions from the people who are standing, and then we'll come back to the panel as well.
Let me say this, that since Martin Luther King was mentioned, during the disturbance of Division Street, Martin Luther King sent a telegram requesting that he would join us on Division in California. That telegram went to the wrong place, to the wrong leadership. It went to los alcahuetes del sistema. It went to the bourgeoisie. That telegram was meant for us on Division and Damon. That telegram was requesting his president that he wanted to join us. The answer by some of these gentlemen was, we don't want no communists in our community. We were cheated twice. During the Poor People's March, we had, again, one of these bourgeoisie leadership wanted to speak in the Poor People's March in Washington. They appointed him. He said, I got so much to say that I will say nothing. And he gave up the mic. He didn't say a word. What I'm saying is that, yes, there's a lot of pop-up Puerto Ricans, alcahuetes, that will pop up and say, I was there, and plenty of us were. But what were we there for? To stop or move? Lo importante de nosotros es, the important of us is de votar lo que no sirve. El representante que no sirva a nuestra comunidad, aunque sea puertorriqueño, aunque sea la maíz que me parió, she's got to go. She's got to go.
Hello, my name is Javier Anaya. I was born, raised, and still live here in Humboldt Park. I ain't going nowhere. First, I want to thank you guys for putting this together, because I think history is very important so it doesn't repeat itself. Not so much to dwell on the past, but to learn from it so we can move forward. I actually have an organization where I work with ultra high-risk youth and young adults in the community, and there's still the same problems. There's still police brutality. They're still picking people up and dropping them off in neighborhoods where they know they're going to have trouble. You know, the young lady asked the question, where are we today compared to 50 years ago? We still have the same problems. You know, we still have the same issues, and this definitely is a grassroots movement, because movement and change starts from the bottom up, not top bottom like people believe it does. And my question is, what next? We're all here today. What happens tomorrow? Does everybody just disperse, forget about today, or is there going to be a movement? Does it continue? What next? What do we do now as the community, as people from Humboldt Park that want change?
Hi, my name is Carmen Cone. I was at Teatro San Juan when the riot started, and I was about 6 months pregnant. And I was very lucky to get out of the theater out on time, because what I heard was that the police actually brought the dogs inside the theater. And it bit a lot of people. But not, I'm quoting for what some people told me, that they brought in the dogs and died there and emptied the theater. Now, what I like to say is that it's got like, it's a pattern that's going on here, because right after the riot, they started moving the Puerto Ricans for the West. And to me, it's not just brutality, It's also it's gentrification. It's all together to move people out. And I think the police is the one that usually when people has to move out of an area, they're the ones either to come and use brutality or actually to, like in our area, because I live just like Delia does, right by the trail. And my house ends up in Ridgeway, because I'm a Ridgeway, so the trail ends up in Ridgeway. So, and I see the pattern. The police came and they started moving the gangs out of the way. This time they didn't do it with a riot or anything. They started the riot, and they started the riot in 1977 in Humboldt Park. There's no doubt that they started those two riots. And to me, it's just a pattern to when people, they want people out of the way, they get real frustrated because we don't move fast enough. And I think that we need to be on the lookout for those kind of things. And I see it happening again. I hear the sirens all the time by my house, all the time now. And it's like they're stopping people constantly and they're searching the youth for nothing. So that's what I got to say.
Hilda wants the last word from the audience. So I think she deserves it.
Thank you. My name is Hilda Frontani, and I want to thank all of you on the panel. But I want to mention that after the riots, the youth that were so involved created organizations like United Puerto Rican Front, ABC, Allies for a Better Community, PROPA, the Puerto Rican Organization for Political Action, and over there, Obed Lado. And those organizations continued that change and became young adults that made the changes happen. And right now I heard, and I got to remember Hector Franco, Propa, that there was a call for action from the young woman here and others to get involved in the organizations that are about to make the change, because that's the way you guys did it. Thank you.
It's clear that the question that was asked about what's next is an individual response as well as a collective one. So to finish our conversation today, I want to turn to the panel and ask them, in a few short words, how you would answer the question of what's next.
What's next? I think that there's enough interest in a follow-up to this event. And I think that one of the things is that if that is the case, I think that we need to find a convener. I think that we need to follow up with another meeting, a meeting that is not going to be you just listening, but you participating. I think that we have to convene a meeting where we can interact and begin to work on a plan of action for this community. What is it? Where is the community? What are we going to do? And I think that, to me, that's the next step. We need to reconvene. It may be San Lucas who reconvenes. It may be maybe the Community Renewal Society that reconvenes. But we need an institution, an entity that calls us to come together again and follow up to this event. And just a commercial. Remember, this pamphlet, I think it's worth reading. There's someone in back for a small donation. You can take this. It's got a lot of history, and you will enjoy reading it. Okay.
I think you're right. Johnny asked the question, what's next? How do we continue this conversation? There's so much richness in this space here that we need to continue having cafecitos and talk about the history and what brought us here, what keeps us here, and what are our dreams. So my boss is back there somewhere. So don't let them out. But Community Renewal Society is the organization that I work for, and it's an organization that right now is working on particular issues around police accountability. We actually have an ordinance out that we want the City Council to pass. It's called Fair Cops, and we're hoping to be able to pass this at the end of this month. So in terms of what you could do around police accountability, please talk to us. Maria, who's back there, she can wave her hand. You can talk to her, and we can certainly work together around some police reforms that we could really push for right now. But we would be happy to convene a space and support that space as well. As someone that lives here, but also as an organization that's been around over 100 years and is committed to social justice.
You know, when we say what we can do, we have two fights coming up. The mayoral election, the governor's election. Register to vote. Don't stand on the sideline. Don't stand on the sideline and wait for another meeting. Register to vote. Know the individual that you have today. Where is he at in your community, in your ward? Register to vote. That is. The second program is that expungement. We need to move to a program to expunge our young men and young adults that cannot get a place to sleep because 20 years ago they got arrested when they were a minor, and that still affects them today to get a place to sleep. Young women are doing the same thing. Don't stand on the sideline and criticize Ivo Chinchal. Vote. Yeah. Vote. That is the power that you have. Whatever organization you go, if you want to vote for Trump, hell no, but if that's your vote, vote. Register to vote, because that is your biggest weapon today. That is your biggest weapon.
It has been my pleasure and my honor to facilitate this conversation today, and I do hope that it's just the beginning. Community, could you please join me in thanking this amazing panel tonight?